Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
Welcome back to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. This is episode 2, April 2nd, 2018, and we are going to be discussing this week Brandon's first book, Elantris, as well as the short story that is a minor sequel / concurrent story called The Hope of Elantris. I am here with my co-hosts, as always, Jordan and Amy. Welcome, guys. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah, can't complain.
All right, so should we just dive in, or does anybody have anything exciting going on that they're just dying to talk about?
I got a table.
Yeah, the best type of table.
Yay.
Is it an innkeeper's table? Name drop?
Probably not.
The product placement
I'm not housing people.
Is really good.
All right, well, okay, so let's dive in. So this week we are going to be talking about Elantris, which is, as I mentioned earlier, was Brandon's first published novel. It was actually the 7th book that he wrote, and apparently it was finished in the year 2000, published in 2006. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is there's one major difference between this book and all the others, and that's the what I refer to as the trinity storytelling system. I've also heard it called the triad system. Amy, do you want to give us sort of a rundown of how that works?
Me? Okay.
Just sort of what exactly he's doing.
So from what I remember of it, he has 3 different narrators, and so there's 3 different storylines that you're following, but they all kind of interweave.
Mm-hmm.
So there's triad 3.
Yeah, so the thing that does sort of stand out to me, though, is it follows a set pattern. So it's not just 3 narrators. It's Raoden, then Sarene, then Hrathen. Then Raoden, then Sarene, then Hrathen, from the beginning of the book straight through until
The Avalanche.
The Avalanche, exactly.
Yeah, I actually hadn't realized that it kept that order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember noticing that, and I was just thinking, okay, so we just finished Raoden, and Raoden was my favorite character the first time I read it. And as soon as one of his chapters ended, I just would stop and say, no, I want to go back to him, but I knew there'd be at least 2 chapters before I got back to him. So, did y'all have a favorite of the 3?
I mean, I was Hrathen all the way.
See, and that's funny because I didn't like Hrathen at the beginning, and a lot of people I talked to, they just disliked him.
He irked me a little bit, but he grew on me.
He really did, and the second and third times I've read through, I've actually enjoyed him quite a bit more. But the first time I read it, Raoden, I just absolutely loved. Sarene was okay, and Hrathen, I was just like, I don't want to listen to, as I was thinking of him at the time that I first read it, I don't want to listen to the bad guy. I want to listen to our protagonist.
You see, that's just where everyone gets it wrong. He wants to save the city. It's not his fault he's evil.
He wants to save the city by purging it.
No, he didn't want...
City, not people. People aren't the city, right?
Fair enough.
No,
okay,
Hrathen did not want to purge it. He was going to great lengths because
he was trying to save it.
He had a total... Mm-hmm. He was told, in his mind, he has to convert the city or it's going to burn. And that's what I liked about him. Instead of being like, oh, this is an impossible task, I hate these sinners and all this stuff, he was like, so, 3 months, huh? Okay, how am I going to do this? And I like it because his chapters, I think, really highlighted the concept of faith and trying to figure out and separating out what he believed from what he did. And I really liked that interplay of him, especially when he started getting called out by the Shu Korath guy. I can't remember he was like the kindly old priest of the other religion. Isn't it called Shu Korath?
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
I don't just asking him, where's your faith? Because he kind of pointed out, hey, you're doing all this strategic stuff, but you don't even believe in it. Because he sort of became this ends justify the means to try and convert everyone. And he's like, you don't even believe what you're doing. So what's going on here? And I loved his chapters. And not just because... So for me, honestly, this was the hardest book for me to get through. Part of that was because I read Mistborn first and then read this.
Right.
And that completely changes your view. But because one, the Trinity storyline is way different from Mistborn.
Right. Brandon mentioned one time that it gave him a lot of extra opportunities, but it really constrained him. Because if he's trying to get character A from point A to point B, he has to spin the story just right so that he can actually happen.
Mm-hmm. So my favorite was probably a mix between Ash and Galadin. I really liked them, but like Sarene, I felt like I needed to like her more, but she's not as dynamic as some of his other characters, and so I'm sort of going, I like her to a point, but she's not really like my favorite ever character in the book. So,
how did you describe her, Jordan? Was it Proto Shallan?
Yeah, she's Proto Shallan. She's totally Proto Shallan. Raoden's Proto Elend, and Hrathen's the guy who dies at the end.
Spoilers. So,
hey, if you can't...
As always, I didn't mention this at the beginning. As always, each episode will have sort of an innate spoiler warning for the book that we're discussing. And then later on in the episode, we will let you know when we're going to start talking about the Cosmere as a whole, which may include spoilers for the other books. So,
but yeah.
Yeah,
but going back to the Trinity thing, it does a couple of things that are interesting. I see why he doesn't go back to it, but it did a couple things that are interesting. For one, when the avalanche hits, it's much more stark in this book because he breaks the pattern that he had been going to and starts jumping from viewpoint to viewpoint sort of as needed. And it is short as he needed. And that really made you feel the avalanche more so than I think a lot of his other books. The other thing it did, and this is I think to its detriment, is sort of what you said about Raoden. You're like, oh, I gotta get through 2 more chapters to get to Raoden. I have the problem where I am lukewarm on Raoden. I really hated Sarene, and not just because I found out I was pronouncing her name wrong the entire time.
Is it really Sarene?
Yeah.
All of the vowels
It's
in the
Sarene.
name.
It looks like Sarene.
Yes. Okay.
I remember,
thank you.
And I thought that for the longest time too. Apparently, all of the
I feel
vowels
betrayed.
in the Aeonic language are pronounced. And so, if you look at if you look in the back of Elantris, it has a picture of all of the Aeon. Each Aeon is vowel, consonant, vowel.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm gonna
so,
look now.
apparently, it is, and hers is based on Aeon Eni.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be Sarene, which I was convinced when the first time I heard Bill say her name, I'm just like, there's no way that's correct. And then I look it up and I'm like, dang it.
I finally, and it bothered me for a long time too. I finally came to accept it when I found out that the character of Sarene is actually based on a friend of his.
You cut out there?
I'm like, I did. I'm sorry about that. I said I finally came to accept the pronunciation of Sarene when I learned that the character of Sarene is actually based on a friend of his whose name was.
You keep
so
cutting
like,
out
okay.
right as you
You
say
cut
her
right
name.
there.
Annie. Her name is Annie.
Her name is Annie.
Yeah, but no, and that's interesting. So for me, Sarene did the entire book. This is my least favorite of Brandon's books, but that's fine. It's his first. But it all hinges on one thing that Bill and I have discussed before, and it hinges on Sarene actually, because Raoden falls in love with her through writing to her before
And talking. They talk.
Oh, that's right, because they had telephones and
They have glowing telephones that talk back.
the Seonophones. Anyway, and so, but they did it just through that, not through actual, being there with one another. And then Hrathen suddenly falls in love with her through arguing with her. And for me, because I don't get Sarene. Like, she doesn't seem that special to me, and just especially compared to his other female characters that I really like. And so Raoden's motivation of trying to, impress her and do things for her, especially in the second half of the book, and Hrathen falling in love with her, it just doesn't work for me. I don't know. It's like a lot of rap music. I don't get it, but there's so many people who enjoy it that it's appealing to someone, but I just don't see it.
All right, I have a few thoughts on that, but why don't you start us off?
So, you keep cutting out still, Bill, just so you know. I don't know.
Yeah, you might just want to change your threshold.
Anyway, but I've read a few romance books, so I feel like I should know more about how you build a good romance. And this is not one of the best romances out there, but it's better than a lot of other ones that have insta-love. And it feels more like with Hrathen. I always want to say Hrathen. Is it Hrathen?
It's Hrathen with a very slight H at the beginning.
Okay, I'm never going to say these names right. Anyway,
it's almost like Brandon has an obsession with weirdly spelled names.
They're better than some.
Yeah, wait till we get to Warbreaker and we all start stuttering.
Anyway, but it feels like with him that there's like different levels. Well, anyway, when you fall in love with someone, there's different levels of love. There's like infatuation when you're just like everything's about them and you're totally into them, but nothing they can do would be ever wrong. And and then you actually like get into more normal stages of love where it's not quite as puppy dog love. And it feels like Hrathen, whatever his name is, has more of the infatuation thing where he's just like, that's what I want a woman to be, and I want her to be more confident and I can actually stand toe to toe with her type thing is more what it feels like to me. And it does sort of have little touches of like insta love, but it always felt weird to me still.
Hrathen also, he's a very combative isn't the word I'm looking for. Confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
And she's one of the first people who actually sort of stand to him. He's kind of a very forceful, I'm going to come in, I'm just going to run you over. And she won't let that happen. Now, that said, I don't think he actually falls in love. I think he becomes upset.
You cut it on the last word. He becomes obsessed.
Obsessed.
Yeah, that's what I was going kind of with the infatuation thing where he's like, I think about her all the time, even though there's not really any, she certainly doesn't feel anything for him that way.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. And for me, it didn't feel like, especially coming off for me, the Vin and Elend relationship in Mistborn, it just neither of these relationships worked for me. And because that's a huge portion of this book, and you have to buy into that, it causes some issues for me personally. But I also have no soul, so.
Unlike the Emperor.
Yeah, unlike the Emperor. Good segue. Yeah, Bill, you're cutting out even more now.
I don't know what to do about it. I might have to. I'm going to mute myself and then switch out.
Okay, that's cool.
Switch to a different. See if that works.
But yeah, so Amy, did you? Was this your first Brandon book?
I think it was. I don't have very vivid memories of reading it, but I'm pretty sure I read this one first and then Mistborn.
Okay, so one of the other thing that caused me. Thanks for the vote for Modulus 16 in chat, confirming my soulless nature. But no, so one of the things for me that also caused issues for me with this book was the twist of the magic system, with the chasm line being the issue. I don't remember exactly where it was brought up, but I definitely figured out what the problem was in the first quarter of the book.
I was not. I'm really terrible at picking up on that. I think because I focus on the characters, and so I'm so focused on the characters and what's going on with them and their journey that there's details that are plunked down. In my second reading, I'm like, well, yeah, there was a hint, and there was a hint, and there was a hint. But I would been so focused, and I read so fast.
Well,
My
and see,
husband notices it. He's like, you read too fast, and so I just miss.
Yeah, and for me, I'm coming off Mistborn, which, no spoilers, we're not talking about that yet, but given the big reveal in the third book, which was 3 books leading up to the thing you didn't realize in the magic system, I start off Elantris like, all right, what's the twist? What's the twist? And then they mention, when the earthquake or whatever they called it, the Raoden, is that when the Raoden happened. You're silent, Bill. When the Raoden happened, it caused this chasm, and then like 2 paragraphs later they mentioned that Elantris is shaped like an Aeon. And I'm just, there's the problem.
Thinking.
And I'm just sort of like... And so for the entire book, as they're trying to unfold the mystery, I'm just sitting there just like, it's obvious. Guys, come on. Did no one think to reverse cause and effect? Not one person?
Let's see, everything broke when this happened. Maybe there's something with that.
Yeah, and so it just, for me, like that was a big issue for me with this book. That said, I thought it was really interesting, the sort of, like, compared to his other magic systems, this is a much softer magic system as far as the mechanics of it. But it's interesting in concept with, and obviously we're going to get into more of that later, talking about shards and stuff, but how there's so many different magic systems on this world, and it's all location-based. I thought that was an interesting concept, given his other books. You can use the magic anywhere, really. It's just the fuel. In this one, where you are is sort of the fuel. Okay, so we were talking about the reveal of the chasm line being the problem. And
got it. Raoden.
And I spot... So it is Raoden, okay. I was talking about how after Mistborn, I was looking for problems and with the magic system to try and figure out the twist, and how I discovered it in the first quarter of the book. And so that might have been the other frustration I had with the Raoden chapters, was that entire mystery I figured out early, and so I viewed Raoden as an idiot while everyone else in the city's telling me how brilliant he is.
Got it.
And so I'm wondering how much... Cause you read Elantris first, didn't you?
Yes.
And so I'm wondering how much of that is because I didn't read it in order, and so I'm getting less polished Brandon at hiding his secrets.
Which is possible.
And how much of it is just for whatever reason, maybe I just got this mystery, it clicks with how my brain works. What about you?
I figured it out right around the time I was supposed.
Okay.
And so that was my first sign. I just thought Brandon is a masterful storyteller because I figured it out right before the main character, which I think is sort of the key, because
that's exactly what you wanted.
Just in time to feel smart, but you don't figure it out early enough where you're thinking, okay, come on.
Come on, you idiot, figure it out.
What about you, Amy? When did you figure it out?
I think it probably was around when Bill did.
Okay.
Probably around there, but I don't remember exactly.
Okay, so I think it's totally...
Because I was more focused on, let's get through the plot, let's get through the story, and whereas I'm like, I don't know what the problem... But I don't know exactly when it was, because I've read too many of his books now, so I don't remember that
I think this is a total result of reading it out of order.
I think it is. I think that's part of your biggest problems with the book overall.
It definitely is, because that reveal really challenges the Raoden chapters to be interesting, because suddenly it's writing only on the personalities, and as we've said, this isn't his strongest characters that he's written.
Right.
And if for whatever reason, the intrigue with the various courts, the Teoish and the... Oh, geez, I can't remember.
Erlon?
Yes, all those courts. For whatever reason, it just doesn't grab me the way his other kingdoms have. Okay, someone booted up a Game Boy.
That was my phone, actually.
Oh, okay.
I have the Mario coin sound.
Nice.
Got it.
So, yeah, my text message is a lightsaber, which is really loud.
And now I'm putting my phone on mute.
Mine is already on mute, I believe, but I'm not sure.
I think somebody did a Twitter thing or something. Anyway, so with the court stuff, I noticed, like, I don't know if you've ever seen, you probably haven't read too many romance books or whatever else where, like, it's more female-centric with the characters. But there's a lot of them where the girls act like airheads, and they drive me crazy. But it was kind of interesting having Sarene, I'm going to choke on these names, having her pretend to be an airhead. And I was like, okay, I'll give Brandon props in the fact that he has her doing it on purpose, because she's like, you know what? If you're going to act and treat me like a twit, then I'll play the twit and then twist things how I want to be able to do the things that I need to.
And it's not she's not just doing that. She acts like a twit, and so they think she's a twit, and they ignore her.
Mm-hmm.
Hear all sorts of things that she wouldn't have gotten to hear otherwise.
And she can sit there and go, I can just hit in this corner and paint, and you just don't even pay attention to me. And I can find out all this stuff that you would have never said if you knew I had a brain. If
I only had a brain.
Oh, could someone? I almost did and said, no, I don't.
I'm here. I'll follow through on your darkest impulses, like singing Wizard of Oz.
All right, so did we finish up talking about the Trinity thing?
Yeah, we did.
Because there was one thing that also did stand out.
Oh?
Okay.
That it helped is with the avalanche, at the Brandon avalanche at the, because he had to switch character to character so fast, it ended up giving us like 1-paragraph chapters, which really accelerated the action.
Oh, because it's just like, it just punches right there, you know, and you're jumping between and you're worried about, oh, what's happening to them? But, oh, no, I have to read about that person, but I have to, you know, and so it made me read way too fast.
Yeah, if you're watching a movie, when they start doing really fast cuts, it gets your heart rate going faster. It's actually a filmmaking technique that they'll do, is just rapid cuts make the action seem faster.
Yeah, as long as you can still see the action, because otherwise you end up with, I don't know, what's the book, Catching
Motion
Fire?
Sickness?
I was thinking The Hunger Games. Well, the funny thing is, The Hunger Games, the way that book was written, is very similar. It has very short chapters. Because of that, when you get to the end, because it always ends, every chapter always ends on a sort of cliffhanger. When you get to the end, it's very easy to say, "Oh, just one more chapter."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a thriller.
And so
style.
there's a lot of one more chapters, and so you just keep turning and turning. And so with the way the Brandon Avalanche went in Elantris, I feel like that's one of the most clear examples of the Brandon Avalanche, because suddenly he's been building and building, and he's got this huge Jenga tower, and then he pulls out a brick and just watches everything fall and happen.
Yeah.
And so, but so that was one thing I actually did like about the Trinity system, because they just started shifting so quick. And then after Hrathen dies, of course, that's just all thrown out the window, because there is no Hrathen, and it's not just going back and forth between Raoden and Sarene. He's starting to add in new characters.
Yeah, because I think you suddenly got a chapter from what's her cousin's name?
Kiin.
Kiin?
Kiin. Yeah, Kiin.
K-I-I-N.
Isn't that the uncle?
That's my Japanese coming out.
Who's the uncle?
That's
cousin. Oh, he's the uncle. Sorry, the cousin is I can't remember his name. Raoden's best friend.
Yes.
I will look into this. Don't worry.
No, I'm gonna beat you to it.
You got us.
Is it Lukel?
Lukel.
Yes, Lukel.
Lukel.
Yeah. He's a prisoner at the time, so it's extra stressful.
Yeah, and so suddenly shifting causes a big change.
Right.
But yeah. So we were also talking about the magic systems. One thing that's weird about this magic system, other than his other one, is we already talked about the Seon phones. Which makes his world a lot smaller. Then once they start teleporting, then it really gets smaller.
Then it's like, oh, we're just right there.
But it's interesting because in terms of versatility, it's definitely the system that can do basically anything, but it's limited by the fact that they need access to the door.
Well, they need access to the door, and then one thing I do like about it, though, is of his magic systems, this one requires study.
Yeah.
You know, the other one...
No bloodlines or anything. It's
The other ones require practice, yes. I mean, but this one, it's not just like. Essentially, the limit to your power is how much you've studied and how well you know the magic.
It's definitely the closest he gets to traditional wizardry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
if it was computer programming,
essentially the best mages in this one are scholars. You know, in Mistborn, they're very active.
They're athletes.
but in this one, the best Elantrian mages are scholars, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, especially when Raoden first starts finding out about stuff from Galadon, and we find out that what was it? Was Galadon's father was
a scholar. He was an Elantrian, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I just that reveal is kind of cool. It's like, this isn't just a really cool room. This was my father's study. Or
did he move it? I can't remember if he moved all the books.
He may have.
Is it a study wherever the books are?
Because they move the books to the underground cave, I think, or they find extra books there.
They find extra books there.
Extra books there. That's right.
Yeah, because that's the underground cave that leads to the lake and the mountains, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The pool or whatever, because it's not very big.
The Deus Ex pool.
The pool that we'll talk about even more when we get to the Cosmere section of the conversation.
So, the other thing we wanted to talk about was the fact that this is his only book he's gone back and fixed.
That's true.
With editing?
The 10th. This is the 10th anniversary edition versus the first copy of the book he released.
My first copy.
Yeah.
I don't have the 10th anniversary.
Yeah, and so the 10th anniversary, he changed. I found somewhere where he had side by side some of the changes. Like, one of the big ones was the section where Hrathen says to Sarene, I almost called her Shallan, tells her...
Shalani?
Yeah. Tells her, like, no, I'm going against the church. And she's like, are you changing religion? He's like, no. And he explains that he still worships Yadith. And he talks about how his religion, like, how little his faith is based on, like, the normal things you would associate faith
like
with.
Doctrine,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah,
right.
It's just, his is based on, it's the only thing that makes sense to me. And so, like, it is doctrinal, but it's not because he's passionate the way Deloff is. He doesn't know how else to make sense of the world. This is the only thing that if he follows it, it makes any sense to him. And he's changed a lot of the... Not like the dialogue is mostly the same, but just the way he wrote it. And if you look at it side by side, you can definitely see, this is Brandon in the early aughts versus Brandon, you know, with however many billions of hours of writing he has now, you know, doing it.
Right, absolutely.
And it's interesting just to see, because we don't normally get to see that with Brandon. The only other book you can really see that with is Warbreaker, if you've seen all the different copies of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which, that's actually how that was one of the cool things, is that he posted it as he published it.
I remember reading
it was available for free on his website.
Yeah.
I remember reading that one. I read like 4th draft and then like the 6th draft, and then he
what year was this published again? Was this... It was 2005?
2005, I just looked it up.
Yeah, and I think he wrote this in 99, according to his own timeline.
He finished writing it in 2000. He started it in 98, and I think finished in 2000.
Okay. Which, first of all, I find that impressive, just the fact that he wrote so many books before he even got published.
One thing I did notice is that while this wasn't the first book he wrote, it was the first book he wrote when he decided, hey, I want to live within epic fantasy. And it's the first one where he started including Cosmere mythology.
Oh, and that's all. That reminds me, because I read the article. This was the first one he also wrote, because he had a phase, which I think like Aether and Night was part of this phase, where he was trying to write to the market, I think was the term he used. And this is the first one he wrote post writing after the market.
Okay.
Because I've heard a lot of advice to not write to the market, because if you're just trying to sell a book versus you're writing something you love, the quality is going to be very different.
if you're writing to the market, you're going to be derivative. Just because
Yeah.
if you know what the market is, that means
then
the
you're
market
gonna hit all of those little tropes that you're supposed to hit to get the
Yeah.
people to buy your books, and that they're not.
Yeah, I think Aether of Night, Mistborn Prime was part of that, and so this is the first one where this was a Brandon book, and he stopped trying to let other people tell him how he should write.
I just recently learned that that White Sand was actually White Sand Prime is what he calls it. That was actually
Okay,
You just cut out there.
sorry.
White Sand Prime was the first book that
he wrote.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And does timeline wise, you were telling me, isn't White Sand and Elantris like the first books that happen?
White Sand and Elantris are the first two, and again, we'll talk more about this on the Cosmere section of the discussion, but those are the two earliest that he's published.
Okay.
Chronologically.
Dragonsteel will be the very beginning.
Because that's pre-Shattering, isn't Dragonsteel?
It's the story of the Shattering.
Okay.
That'll
that'll definitely be first.
Yeah.
That'll be a trilogy, starring Hoid actually, and then the final Mistborn trilogy will be starring Hoid. So.
Yeah. So
anyway,
do we want to talk about Hope of Elantris here now?
Well,
sure.
first I want to take a look at the magic systems.
Okay.
We've talked about how this is sort of his softest magic system. That's, to be more specific, that's Aeon Door, where they're drawing the pictures in the air, the one that's only available to Elantris. In Elantris, there are two other magic systems that show up. There's Cheshan, which was the one that, and I can't remember his name.
Shuden?
Shuden.
That's the one that Shuden uses. It's very similar to Tai Chi.
Everybody was kung fu fighting,
and
it was awesome.
Well, it makes sense because he's still tracing shapes in the air,
just with his body versus his hand.
And all of the magic systems that happen on Cell have that same concept. So we have Aeon Door, we have Cheshan, and then we have Dakor. Dakor, they're making the images and the shapes with their actual bodies.
Hardcore, Darkor.
Which is what Hrathen has on his arm, where he
and it's like in his bones almost or something.
It actually reshapes his bones into different shapes.
Yeah, that's one of the things at the end of the book. They say they examined like the bones of these guys, and they're like, it's actually kind of beautiful once you actually examine it.
And the thing is, so like with Hrathen, and we know with Hrathen that nothing
is for sure.
What was it, Jordan?
Okay. I've given this book a lot of crap so far, but it by far has Brandon's best opening line in any book he's ever written. I'm just going to read it because it's just freaking gorgeous.
This is in chapter 1, not the prologue.
Yeah, not the prologue. No one cares about the prologue.
Elantris' beautiful ones.
That was dumb. No,
Jordan's got this.
This line. Prince Raoden of Erelon awoke early that morning, completely unaware that he had been damned for all eternity. So I just read that and I'm like, okay, we'll see where this goes.
I remember I actually had, when I was reading the book, I had that book sitting on a bookshelf and I was just chatting with a friend who was not an epic fantasy reader. And she came in and we were chatting and she idly picks up the book and she flips to chapter 1. She reads it and she just said, "That's one of the best first lines I've ever read."
It's set none of his other books, in my opinion, have anything close to that good of an opening line.
It's really hard to get a good opening hook line. It's kind of that's the thing is you're supposed to hook them with the first thing because then you're like, I want to know more about that. And so you continue.
You get the first sentence, you say, "I'll give you 5 more sentences." All right.
Yeah. You get a bit more.
Yeah, we'll do it.
No, and then the other one that it's my favorite line in all his books. There's only one that's maybe even close, and it's weird because this is my least favorite book, but has 2 of my favorite lines. It's just after Hrathen finally does his heel face turn, and Deloff is all pissed, and he goes to stab him, and it clinks off the armor that they have said throughout the book this armor is just show armor. It's made to look impressive. It's not functional. And it clinks off, and Delof just sits there and goes, lol, what? And Hrathen's just like, you should know by now, Delof. Nothing I do is just for show. And it's just like, oh my goodness, Hrathen, you're so much cooler than everyone else.
He's committed.
Oh my
And
goodness.
as he says that, you see, like, doesn't he describe the look in Delof's eyes?
Yeah, it's
It's
something.
just one of those moments where you're just like, I have gotten in deeper than I expected.
Now,
Now,
Delof.
that said, now then Delof shows that he's no one to be trifled with either.
Yeah.
But still.
It turns out just being a charger from Left 4 Dead isn't as good as being a full-on brute. Or, I don't know, what are the giant guys? Tanks? That's what they are. But
I never really left for
chargers only have one beefy arm, and tanks are just beefy. The joke makes a lot of sense if you played Left 4 Dead. If not, man, this is falling flat. Look.
I get it a little bit. My husband played it for a while, but I couldn't watch it much because me and zombies were hit and miss.
I don't know. Hey, look, sometimes the Aeon glows perfectly. Sometimes you forget to draw the chasm line. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah. Hopefully some of our viewers or listeners play Left 4 Dead, and so they'll get the joke.
Yeah, I just need that Venn diagram to cross over. It's for those people.
The people who are big Cosmere fans and big Left 4 Dead fans as well.
Yeah.
So I had some random things that I liked about it that a lot of times. So Brandon's really good at world building, and he makes sure to have lots of different thoughts. And there were a lot of different things with parts that probably bored you, Jordan, because they were all Serene's stuff where she's dealing with the women and teaching them defense and other stuff. And I'm kind of like, let's hear and analyze this a little more because I already know plot-wise basically what's going to happen when I was rereading it. But it was interesting with the fencing, how a lot of women were like, we get to do the masculine thing? This is a little worrisome. And they were really hesitant about it. But as soon as they actually got to do it and be physical about it, it really changed they felt super empowered. And I must admit, there are times that power tools scare me, and I'm getting over that. But when I'm sitting here going, I built that thing, I did the thing, and like one of the costumes I made, I had to get all of these pieces of metal and make them into plates and grind them. That was strangely empowering to sit there and go, I made that metal not sharp. All of those stinking pieces.
That's why they're called power tools, because they make you feel empowered.
Yes. You feel empowered. But
Amy,
what?
I want a picture of you now, like a meme picture of you holding one of your power tools and just the caption, "This is my blade."
I can probably make that happen.
Really, all I want her to do now is just the Tim Taylor grunt.
There it is. That makes all the trouble we've gone through this episode worthwhile.
10 out of 10 would do again. Anyway.
You have to get your Dr. Claw sometime too from Gadget.
Oh my god,
yeah.
we're gonna make that.
Anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about was that I did think it was interesting with the fencing classes. One of the ladies actually started to lose weight because she'd been a larger lady, and later on in the thing, her husband's like, "You're making her lose weight. I don't like that." And so it was kind of interesting to have that flipped where most cultures that you see in books and in everywhere, they want their women skinny and curvy, and that's how they want them, and they don't want them doing it, any of the thing. But he liked his women a little more plump, and I'm guessing that was an area thing or his country, or I can't remember exactly what it was. But the only other place I've really seen that is in a Robin Hobb book, which was the Soldier's Son series, which was a super hard book series to read.
Gosh,
and
that is such a
that's a whole other
series.
Yeah. But like, you don't see that very often, that it's being fat is considered a good thing.
Yeah, talk about the gender things. This goes back to the proto-Shallan thing. Because Shallan talks a lot about the gender roles, especially in book 1, because Yasna is totally not caring about gender roles. She's like
defying everything. She's like,
and it's that sort of had that same sort of vibe. But it's interesting when Brandon decides to actually make gender roles a focus. He definitely picks at least one or two things that are completely different from us to try and make a gender role, because one, it describes the fact that this is a very different planet than ours, but it like, I didn't enjoy Sarene chapters. She had a lot of interesting stuff in there. It's just it wasn't interesting as Hrathen's chapters, and
if the narrator is not very interesting, it's hard to watch.
exactly. But no, like the fencing stuff was interesting, and her trying to figure out the stuff with her father-in-law and what's going on with him, that was interesting. I had completely forgotten about the Just Scary Mysteries plot line.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, that just like came out of nowhere.
And I'm like,
Like, all the maids
I
are
forgot
disappearing.
about human sacrifice going on.
Under the city,
like-
no big deal.
Well, it's like, she's following him, and she's going through the sewers, and then she walks around the corner, and he's naked with a blade over a dead woman.
It's basically everything in those Southern Baptist things telling you not to do Dungeons and Dragons because this is what it leads to.
Just you wait, you'll be one of those maids that dies.
Oh, God. It was just sort of out of there.
I now want to ask Brandon if that's
No.
what the inspiration for the Just Scary Mysteries was. But
But yeah, looking at my notes, like that covers most of the Sarene parts that I felt like I needed to talk about.
Right.
So, check that box.
No, I actually really liked the Sarene Raoden relationship. Like, I've actually... There was actually a girl that I had a big crush on a few years ago, and I fell hard for her largely after reading her blog. Just seeing her thoughts. So I actually kind of get that relationship.
it's almost like why in the YouTube video you have two Aeon Rayos next to your head.
I like Aeon Reo. It means spirit.
I like Omi because it means love, and my husband got me the necklace.
I love that. So he got
You
that
can't
from
see it.
Brandon's website?
So I don't know, yeah. Probably, yeah.
Well, crap, now
But-
I gotta have
Very
a
cool.
favorite Aeon. Keep talking, people.
I think his favorite is Eni because it's part of Sarene.
What does Eni mean?
It does mean witty.
That's the conversation. You have it on the...
That's right,
the-
that's right.
On the
That's right,
banner.
it's Eni, not any, like I kept saying.
So...
I'm not good at this.
All right, so, and then, of course, in addition to, we talked about the magic systems, Andor, Cheshan, Dakor, there are two others that we'll talk about when we get to the First Soul discussion, and that's Forgery and Blood. I'm not sure about, I'm not very familiar with that one, but we'll talk about that one.
I think my favorite Aeon must be Aeon Aha, just because I like Take On Me.
Anyway. All right, so should we move on to the Hope of Elantris?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so this one's got some backstory, and I love this story. This actually happened while he was dating Emily, his wife, or his now wife. She was a teacher. She was an English teacher for, I think this was a 12-year-old girl or a 14.
I don't know.
Anyway, there was a girl in his, at the time, this girl he was dating, and they weren't even dating exclusively. But there was a girl named Matisse who, for one of her book reports projects, she created this
Portfolio almost.
almost a portfolio. It was a book. It was like an almanac of Cell almost, where it had sketches of different characters. It had scraps of cloth to represent the Elantrian cloth. It had pouches with different materials that would have been local to the area. It was an impressive piece of work.
Jeez, I thought Chris came from the White Sands world. Apparently she came from Emily's class.
Something like that.
It's
But,
the very first Ars Arcanum.
Kind of. But anyway, so she did this for a book report, and she turned it in. And Emily, she had no idea that her teacher even knew Brandon Sanderson, much less was dating him. And so she shows this to him, and he was touched, and he said, this is kind of like amazing that somebody would do this for my work. And so he decided he wanted to do something for her. So he wrote this story, which has sort of been brewing in the back of his mind, and he named the main character after this girl.
Which I think is an achievement in real life, like something pops
that's
up.
really well. And then the cool thing is that years later, or not years later, later that year, or it was apparently shortly after this happened that that they started dating exclusively, Brandon attributes it at least partially to this event. But later, when they got married, this girl actually gave the book that she had compiled to them as a wedding present.
Oh man,
which I'm just like, okay, that is cool.
that is just adorable as all get out.
Really cool. But one of the things that Brandon talks about, I went through and I read the annotations of the Hope of Elantris and of Elantris, and one thing he mentions is the iceberg theory when it comes to writing, which is pretty much what you would think it is based on iceberg. For every good book, there's tons and tons of stuff that the writer tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And this was it adds weight to the story, and this is sort of one of the examples that he was like, I kind of want to show what was going on in the background. I knew all of this in my head as I was writing, and so it was sort of an addition to the story that he wanted to tell us. So, I mean, so can we just? A lot of our listeners may not have read The Hope of Elantris. Can we do just a very, very brief summary of sort of what happens? Either of y'all?
So the really brief summary is it starts out with Matisse, right?
Yeah.
And she's the babysitter / nanny for all the little kids in Elantris. Oh my goodness, I'm getting emotional. This is not even cool. Mom Jean, stop. And she's telling the kids to go to sleep, and they don't want to go to sleep. And then they start hearing more and more noise going on, and everybody starts going, crap, what's going on? And the kids won't go to sleep, or I think they get the kids to sleep. And then fighting starts breaking out, and they're told, you got to get these kids out of here. Everything's going bad. And so they manage to get the kids most of the way out of the way, but then there's the crazy warriors whose names I can't remember.
Dark Horde. They're coming in, and so she has to provide a distraction to get away. Do we want me to finish the story or
I mean, essentially what happens is just
anyway.
that. Yeah, just give sort of a brief. Like you don't have to. Yeah.
Spoil everything. So then she manages to not get killed because she tells the story, but it's all prefaced by Sarene and Raoden. They're together, and this is afterwards, and it's Ash or Seon telling Raoden about where he was during the last fight.
Basically during the avalanche.
Mm-hmm. So that's the rough summary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've got a link to the story on Brandon's website in the show notes, as well as a link to his annotations.
And it's a really quick read. I liked it a lot.
It's very similar to a lot of what Brandon does in his other books, where he'll have some one chapter in the middle of the avalanche that's just from a completely unknown person's perspective, just to sort of give you, and here's what the average people are going through when they don't have superpowers.
And he actually almost did that in the book, doing this scene from Matisse's father's perspective.
I think it's definitely more powerful from Matisse's perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Because every other chapter that he does, Raoden, Sarene, and Hrathen all have various different levels of capability and allies that they know are going to come and help them, if it gets outside of their field of expertise. And this is just from the perspective of someone who has no such guarantees. And on top of it is having to cart around a bunch of kids while everything's on fire and they're literally being chased by demons.
Yeah,
which, I can't wait to see the kids counseling, in later years.
Yeah.
One thing that was really cool that stood out to me about this as well was, the kids were sort of Karada's motivation throughout the entire book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she had been working so hard to keep them safe. And Brandon said that it was sort of a tribute to her. He said he didn't want her to go through all that and then have them become Hoid right before at the end and have to suffer through all that. And so he kept them safe sort of as a reward to her for her, basically for her struggle that she'd gone through. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of a little nod to the character. Because these characters, when authors write, the characters become real.
Oh yeah.
And so I think it's really cool that he actually sort of gave her that.
Brandon is a
Filthy
benevolent
actor.
god.
So, all right. Anything else on Hope of Elantris you want to talk
No.
about before we move on to the Greater Cosmere?
I think it's time for us to get into the deep end, man.
All right. Just so you know, if you don't want any spoilers for other books, we're going to talk about a few other things, even works that you may not know exist that we don't want to talk about because you're not supposed to find out that work until later on. We're getting ready to dive deep into the Greater Cosmere and where exactly Elantris and Sel, the planet where Elantris takes place.
Even if, ironically, their shard pool is shallow.
Anyway. So, we mentioned earlier that Elantris is one of the earliest books in the cosmic timeline. In the timeline, he said that it's the first one. He's also said that White Sand is the first one, and so I'm not sure which of the two actually comes earlier. I believe that White Sand probably comes earlier, but I'm not entirely positive about that. So, but either way, it's one of the earliest ones in the cosmic. So, Jordan, do you want to tell us about the shards that are on Sel right now, or
Okay, yeah.
are assigned to Sel?
So apparently they used to have, much like the Mistborn, they had two shards. They apparently weren't exact opposite shards the way they were on Scadrial, but they were called Devotion and Dominion. And you're like, I wonder what their intent is. Well, guess what? You don't get to know, because Odium spawn killed them before the series even started.
Because they're dead.
Yeah, they're dead, and they're splintered. And the thing that I find very interesting about their splintering versus some of the other splinterings we know about is, one, we see their splinters in this world. They are the Scions for Devotion and the Skays for Dominion. But other than the the splinters, their powers seem to have come together in this shattered slurry. It's why it's called Aeon Door. We know the names for them are somehow tied or something. I don't know. But the point is, it's both their powers together. And so, looking at it, you gotta say, okay, so part of this is that they have dominion over a place, maybe. And that's why maybe everything's geography based, because you have to control the area, and all the aeons are based around what they look like. If you go to Emperor's Soul, the soul stamps are based around what that area looks like and all that stuff. So that might be the Dominion part. That's the prevailing theory right now, but that's the best info we got. Devotion, cosmonauts have even less theories on what devotion is. So I was like, well, maybe it's people who have to be devoted to something. I think it's more supposed to be sort of like you're devoted to a study, maybe, because no matter what your magic is, you have to get the symbols right. In Emperor's Soul, you have to know the history of it. Even the Decor monk,
on a study.
Yeah, even the Decor monks, it takes a willing sacrifice of people to do a lot of the stuff they do. And so it requires some form of study, I think. I don't know.
Or sacrifice mixed, or kind of either or.
Yeah.
They also say devotion. That if you take that to its extreme end, devotion becomes almost obsession,
fanaticism.
Fanaticism, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but my theory, because of the fact that we do see the splinters of Scions versus Skays, and those two definitely split down the Shu Korath and Shu Dareth. I think we can probably say whatever it is the Darkor monks do is probably closer to SICS, and what the Elantrians do is closer to devotion. But I think it's a situation, and so I think it's one of those things where but the thing is, it's still combined because of the shattering. It's not like Ruin and Preservation, who have very distinct magic systems tied to them.
Well, and one of the things that I read as I was looking at just different questions people have asked Brandon over the years was they asked about if endowment were killed, if people would continue to awaken or to return. And one of the things that Brandon said in response was interesting. He said, there wasn't somebody actually wielding the shard, magic would start to develop sentient. So you take that, and then you take sort of dominion and devotion merging into each other, and there is that sort of conscious thought that actually communicates with him when Raoden is put down into the shard.
Yeah,
he actually hears a voice, I believe.
He definitely does,
and is trying to persuade him to come in, and he's like, "No, I'm not gonna."
It's not time yet.
Yeah, then he said, "Oh, here we are." Raoden's cool embrace, blah blah blah. "Come," it said. "I give you release." It was a comforting parent. It wanted to take away his pain and sorrows, just as his mother had done once. "Come," it pled. "You can finally give up." No, Raoden thought. Not yet.
What is it, Gladiator?
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of the pool. So we see pools in other books, I believe.
Yes.
Are there any?
Yes, we do.
The one that most of us probably are familiar with is the Well of Ascension. Which Word of Brandon has told us, and I think we actually even talked more about this in Hero of Ages, that's actually one of the aspects of the body of preservation.
It's supposed to represent the cognitive.
So aspect. The shards, just like there are three realms, there's the physical, the spiritual, and the cognitive. There are also three representations of each of the shards. So there's a physical representation, and so these pools are often referred to as shard pools, which are essentially the cognitive representations of each of the shards. This pool is one of them. I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be the doors or if it's supposed to be dominions. I'm guessing it wouldn't be devotions, because devotions is probably in Fjordal.
The research I did, most of the people who are fans theorize it's devotions specific shard pool.
Devotions, really, not dominion.
Well, because the stuff she says where it's like, you can give up and, you can retire sounds more devoted. And the fact that it's near Elantris, where the Seons are, which we know Seons are the splintering of devotion as opposed to the SICS.
Okay. That contradicts what we were saying earlier, I thought. I thought we were saying that devotion was other.
Was what?
Never mind. Don't worry about it.
Okay. But the other thing about shard pools that we find out through both the Stormlight Archive and through Mistborn's Secret History, which again, if you're here and you haven't read these things, you need to leave now and do these things, because your life will there will be spoilers, and
this will be on YouTube later.
Your life will be better from knowing this stuff and reading it. Way better than it is now. Like your life right now, it's at a 6. It could be at a 10.
Reading it in Brandon's words rather than ours, because we are not going to do this justice. We are talking about these in summary without building.
But we see Hoid take the shard pool in Secret History, and we see him transition to the cognitive realm. And before Secret History, we weren't sure how shard pools work. We knew perpendicularities existed. But this is the first time, and it's obviously it's his first book, that we see a perpendicularity in use. Not to travel until the very end of the book, Which
which is in the 10-year.
Yeah,
it's
in
not
the
in the
10-year
original.
Yeah, and that's only in the special edition.
Yeah, and so, but it's one of those things where it turned out to be a lot more. So I did a little research, and apparently Brandon has, if you go into the Elantris chapter, not summaries, but where Brandon has commentary on each chapter.
Annotation.
Annotation, thank you. It's a big word. It gets you a lot
The
of points
director's
in
commentary.
He talks about how originally this was literally just a Deus Ex Machina. Like, he did it. He had no clue that it would be involved in the Cosmere. And he had to...
Really?
Yeah, and so apparently he had to come up with this after the fact. And now, fortunately, it actually ties in very well with what he did. And it's part of the reason, I think, because his annotations were from the non-10th anniversary. I think it's why he ends up putting the footnote at the end with Hoid, is to show that there's more going on, and to show that this does tie to the Cosmere at large. But yeah, the Shattered Shards are very interesting.
Well, it's not just the Shattered Shards, though, because, again, Ruin and Preservation aren't shattered, and they still have the pools. But the way that they interact with the Cosmere is fascinating.
And I swear, somewhere they say that using the perpendicularities on Cell is tricky because of the nature of them. I don't remember where, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing is, I mentioned the book Aether of Night. It's one of two that Brandon wrote and never published. The other one is White Sand, which started off as a prose form. There was White Sand Prime, and then White Sand, which is this one, which he said is one of the better written ones. He's actually rather proud of White Sand, and which I think is actually worth the prose form if you get a hold of it, because it adds quite a bit that you lose in the graphic novel format. Just because
you can only do so much with the graphic novel when
exactly.
You have to do pictures.
But in Aether of Night, there's actually a similar pool that it kind of goes ballistic and crazy things start happening with it. But it's another pool. I've got a copy of it. I can send it.
Yay!
Do we know if Aether of Night is still canon? Because he said he doesn't intend to rewrite.
No, he said that until a book of his is published, it's not canon.
Okay.
So Aether of Night isn't considered canon. It was still, I enjoyed it. He isn't necessarily all that proud of it because, like you said, it's when he was still writing to the market. But I really enjoyed it. So, but yeah, it's another shard pool that sort of shows up. So we've seen several of these popping up. I know that we know of one in Horneater Peaks on Roshar.
Oh.
And so yeah, there's just a few different things. So.
Dots are connecting for me. I'm really bad at keeping all of the Cosmere stuff all connected, so you guys make me go, I should have clicked with that, but oh well.
That's only because we read fan theories of people who...
We stay up until 3 a.m. reading interviews with Brandon and stuff.
And I chase children. And build things.
And I am alone.
Oh.
No, it's good. Okay, so speaking of alone, who is the... This transitions, Jordan.
I know it does. That's what's hilarious.
Speaking of alone, there is one character in the Cosmere who is pretty much the ultimate loner. He's my favorite character in the Cosmere. I am, of course, speaking about Hoid. So, where does Hoid show up in this book? Because he has shown up in every novel, and all but, I believe, 1, maybe 2 short stories, Brandon. So where do we see him in Elantris?
He is random beggar number 3, as we noted, or whatever. Anyway, because Sarene is trying to do her widow's trial, and so she's distributing food and clothing to Elantrians, and then later on she's trying to give weapons to them. Right? She's trying to sneak weapons to him, and she sneaks them through with Hoid, and it's very obvious that he's like, yeah, I'll get those in. I'm not going to question you on it.
Okay, so
all right, so Jordan, what we learned something today. Hoid was not just hanging around to watch things happen. Why was Hoid on Cell?
So, first of all, I just want to point out before we go into this, because I read everything backwards, when you had to tell me Hoid's important in the Mistborn books, and I'm like, what's a Hoid? Which led to the last episode's title. But this, I can't imagine how unimportant he seemed in Brandon's very first book, where they're just like, why did they name a random beggar? But no,
people make him to give him a name.
Yeah,
people don't go, I'm Random Beggar number 3.
But then in Mistborn, he shows up again. He's bald in Mistborn, by the way. I just listened to that today. Yeah, I didn't realize that. So,
but it's just one of those things that
he knocks out teeth in other books or whatever else to change his appearance.
But I can imagine where people suddenly realize it's the same name. They're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Yeah. Oh, Incredibles. Anyway, he shows up in the 10th anniversary. It's the not the epilogue, but it's like a postscript, I think. It's after
it's
the
like
epilogue.
an extra epilogue scene.
And it's just like 2 pages, but it's Hoid is suddenly unwrapping himself. He has all these bandages on as part of his beggar disguise, and he's talking to what sounds like a SICS, or
I think it is a SICS.
Well, so it doesn't. This is the thing that I find interesting. It doesn't actually say it's a SICS. It says it sucks in the light, and
sounds like the opposite of a Scion.
Yeah, which that they describe SICS that way. Brandon also describes something else that sucks in light, and those are void spren. Oh. The fact that he doesn't say SICS makes me wonder if Brandon's up to something, or if he just didn't want to say SICS. I don't know, but the fact
if they're the same thing on different words.
Yeah, because they definitely can be, because we do know that on the Stormlight worlds that the spren are splinters. So, could very well be. But, more to the point, he's having a jovial conversation with it, and it's being like, well, looks like your plan didn't go according to plan. Did you really think you'd become one? And he's like, it's because it's doing it from his perspective, and he's like looking at his hands, and he's like, it's not glowing at all. As if somehow he expected to become an Elantrian. What were you doing, Hoid? What did you do? Why did you think you were going to be an Elantrian, Hoid? Because this is the other thing. We know he's been there a while. And the SICS talk about, or what we assume is a SICS, talks about, and it's like, you're not going to be able to fulfill your part of the deal now. And he's just like, oh, well. And then he goes into the shard pool and disappears. Why is he making deals with SICS? And so some people have theorized, and I read it and like their theories, and I'm like, oh, he might. They've theorized that, what if Hoid was there 10 years ago when the Raoden happened? What if Hoid caused the Raoden as part of some gambit to try and become an Elantrian? And you're like, Hoid wouldn't do that. May I point to you to Oathbringer, his conversation with Shallan, where he warns her, and it's like, basically tells her, I'm not a bad guy, but understand, I will watch your planet burn to the ground if it gets me what I need to get. So he is definitely operating somewhere on the neutral D&D morality scale.
And then, of course, he goes and muddies it by having the cute moment where he saves the orphan.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm just like, he saved the orphan. It's so cute.
I have... So if you take a look at chat, they have pointed out something that I hadn't thought. There is one other thing that absorbs light.
Mm-hmm.
Nightblood.
Mm-hmm.
True. And void binding itself also absorbs light.
What does that say about Nightblood?
I don't know, man.
There is something horribly
Bill,
wrong with...
Why are you questioning Nightblood? He just destroys evil. That's all he does.
He's so cute in his evil destruction.
I know.
He is terrifying.
I'm sure in real lief, yes. He's one of those things that I'm like, I love in books, but in real life I would be utterly horrible.
The adorable monster.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, it's just a little Cerberus.
Oh, God.
It's only slightly gonna gnaw on my soul. But no, the other thing, and this is an aside, because this is all super serious Cosmere stuff, because of the way they pronounce things in Cell.
Hoid and Hoid.
And there's the whole wordplay, which is actually, I listened to the original audiobook And it's not by Brandon's usual voice actors, because it was his first book.
Yeah.
And when he said Hoid, he always said Hoid, which the Skays is saying Hoed, which are technically...
Right, fair enough.
And Hoid sits there, and he's like, you need to know it's Hoid. That's a very important difference on this world. And the Skays is like, yeah, I know, Hoed. And just keeps doing it to piss him off.
He's snarky.
Yeah, Twitch are just like, why is this one snarky? The other ones don't get this uppity. What's so special about this? What is Hoid doing, dang it?
No, I remember Ash getting a little, not quite that, but he would still have a little bit of snark to him.
Yeah.
But the thing, when you say what is Hoid doing, one thing we know from the other books, Hoid is collecting magic. He's collecting different magic systems so that he can access. So we know he wanted to be an Elantrian. We know that he's got a bead of Lerasium from Scadrian. We know that he can awaken from Nalthis. We know that he's a ferochemist somehow. I have no idea how that happened. We know that... And what was the last one? He's got his own form of light weaving.
And maybe Shallan's version too. Who knows?
We don't know. And so it's just sort of... He wanted to be an Elantrian. Now, the interesting thing is, does Elantrian magic work off of Cell? Would it have mattered even if he had become...
People have asked Brandon that. He seemed to indicate that it would be very difficult to get it to work.
Well, because one thing that they've said is even the farther they get from Erelon and from Elantris,
the weaker
the magic is. So when they teleport to Teod,
that's like the limit of where they can go, really.
Yeah,
and even then they were already like they weren't getting the same results.
Yeah, they had to set up a literal firing line of Aeons just to be effective. That said, for some reason, Dark Horror monks don't know how to duck, so that worked out well.
They're not expecting that.
Yeah, no one expects the teleport fire squad.
Okay, so in addition to Hoid, we do know of a few other people who have become what are commonly referred to as world hoppers. And one of them comes from Elantris. He's one of the major characters in the book.
One of my favorites.
One of my favorites, too.
Sule.
And that is Galadon. The
surly,
uncommonly surly Duladin.
Brandon really likes his trope of saying, these people aren't like these people here. But I'm going to show you the not typical version of that for some reason.
Brandon is very much.
It's more fun to have them not do what you're expecting them to do, because then you're sitting around. Well,
but I don't expect them to do it anyway. I don't know what a doula is.
Well, it's sort of like showing the rule through the exception.
Yeah.
He does the same thing with Sazed. He does, all sorts of. Tensoon, absolutely. But Galadon. So Galadon actually shows up in one of the interludes of The Way of King.
I reread it because I was like, I need to see if I can spot him this time. Because I'm terrible at spotting him.
Apparently the main way that people recognized him is through his speech pattern, which Brandon is actually really good at keeping consistent.
Incredibly so.
Because one, he refers to people as friend, which in Elantris he does it in his native Duladel. Or Duladin?
Duladel.
Whatever language. Right. And I think Duladel is the place.
Yeah.
Anyway, in his native tongue, he refers to them as Suli, which means friend. That, and then he in the interlude in Way of Kings, he ends a lot of his sentences with the word understand, question. In other words, kolo. And so people just started noticing that, and suddenly they said, I know who this guy is. He's also described...
He's nicknamed as Grump. So, I mean...
They call him Grump. The grumpy doula.
Ishik does, yeah. The random Pure Lake guy.
Well, and then on top of that, yeah.
And it has friend. Like, it seems like almost every line that Grump says, he says friend. Almost. And then the other one he doesn't, he says understand in the middle.
So, he's joined with two people from other books that we'll talk about later. But they seem to be chasing after Hoid. So, now, who are these people? Like, what's the name of the group?
The 17th Shard, and they write a mean wiki.
And apparently that was very, very intentionally chosen by the group and by Brandon, of course, but by the in-universe group who's chasing him down. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they want, but we know that they're meddling.
No, we know what they want. What they want is to know what Hoid is doing.
Right, they do want to keep tabs on him. So,
So here's my question: how far in the timeline is Elantris from the Stormlight Archive? Do we know?
thousands of years.
That's interesting because we know Galadon is effectively immortal.
He's an Elantris. He's not glowing though.
Well, but that's because he's far away from the.
Oh, that's true.
But he is an Elantris.
Yeah. Although we do know Elantrians can glow outside of Elantris.
We also know that Elantrians can create illusions.
Yes.
For themselves.
Oh, that's right. Because I'm sure.
And he got that front row center training on how to do that. So.
Oh, because Raoden was.
Because Raoden thing. So.
And then on top of that, just the fact that he's doing it, it's interesting that he's the one they've decided to send world hopping from Cell. Because frankly, I would have thought Karada would have been more likely to do it.
Karada's dead.
Is she?
She had her head cut off.
Was that hurt, man?
She gets grabbed.
Yeah, she's gone. She's dead.
Ignore that. I'm mixing up details somewhere. Somewhere there's someone who's alive that I'm going to be shocked to find out.
Yeah, she is distinctly dead. So.
Yeah. That's
sad. A cover band name somewhere. Distinctly
dead. Or a NextCom mission.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. That's a little too close to home, Bill. Too soon. But no, it's interesting just because he has pseudo wanderlust, but not really.
Well, and he also never really wanted to be an Elantris.
Yeah, like
it's
interesting that he would end up going off to do stuff. That he would get that he would go off and join the 17th Shard or whatever.
Right.
Like big spoilers.
If it is 1,000 years ago, if it is 1,000 years later, I mean, his motivations could have changed a little bit.
Oh,
right.
He's allowed to have character growth.
Yeah. But it's just still interesting that he chooses him. Frankly,
Brandon chose him.
Yeah, I would have thought Raoden might have been.
Raoden may be part of the 17th Shard as well. We have no idea who is part of this group. We just know that these three individuals, one is from Mistborn and one is from White Sand, are also just traveling to different worlds and looking for.
Yep.
They want to know what he's doing just as much as everybody else.
Where in the world is Hoid San Diego?
Hoid.
That's hard to get that rhythm just right.
Where in the world is Hoid?
Hoid San Diego.
Hoid.
Yeah, I tried to hum it and it didn't quite. It felt weird.
We need acapella to save us.
Rockapella.
Rockapella, that's right. Rockapella.
Anyway. All right, so I think we should probably start wrapping up. So, did y'all have any closing thoughts on Elantris, Hope of Elantris, its place?
Names are hard. Names are really hard.
Names are hard.
They definitely are. Even though this is definitely my least favorite of Brandon's works, that's like saying it's my least favorite steak. It's still a Brandon book. It's still better than almost every other literature you're going to get, especially in the fantasy genre. He just has a firm grasp on everything. And even his least interesting characters in my eyes have interesting things that they're doing that can keep me from skipping over chapters that I've done with other fantasy writers. And it's something that if I had to tell someone to read Brandon Sanderson, I'd be really broken up with telling them to start with Mistborn or start with Elantris. The argument to start with Elantris is clearly that's the correct order. It
only gets better from here.
Yeah, it only gets better. At the same time, I want to make sure they keep reading Brandon. And Mistborn was so good that I then read his worst book, in my opinion, and I'm like, okay, when's the next one? So, I don't know. I don't know what to suggest to people. All I
Right.
know is that
I think
Brandon's good.
when I have suggested stuff, I think I've said Warbreaker because it feels like it's more kind of by itself.
It's more developed, but it is a standalone.
Yeah,
So that's
not
why
as
I
big
think
of
I've
an
suggested that one, and I'm sitting there going, and it's just a really cool concept, and the cover art is gorgeous on it. And so I guess that's what
interesting.
I've suggested a couple times. Though my husband keeps mentioning random tidbits from it. I'm like, I forgot all about that. I have to reread this and this and this and this, everything. So
I'm looking forward to going.
Same
Yeah.
here, because that'll be an interesting one, because I don't have the reinforcement the way I do with Mistborn. But yeah, it's weird rereading these books. There are things in it you're just like, oh my goodness, that happened.
And that was important.
Yeah.
yeah, and the other thing that throws me is I know I'm going to be doing this episode. I need to find things to talk about, different points that are going to mean more to discuss. And then I also realize connections that too.
Right. Honestly, one of my favorite things about Elantris is just where it began. Because it began, Brandon said, I want to write a story about a prison city for zombie lepers.
That is a good description right there.
Magical zombie lepers.
As opposed to non-magical zombies of any type?
Yeah. 28 days later, non-magical type of zombie.
Fair enough. Okay.
That's a zombie movie I will not watch.
There's a lot of zombie movies I will not watch.
These
But
are the
this is a
slow.
zombie
These are the
story that I
slow
enjoy.
zombie kind. These are the
But,
zombies that limp and say "ow" with every step.
But again, Brandon, like we said, he likes to subvert tropes. So he took zombies and he subverted them. In Mistborn, he took the heist movie and the evil overlord and the chosen hero, and he subverted it. And it's just sort of, it's one of the things that Brandon often will do is he'll take a genre and he'll flip it on his head, he'll make it his, and you'll read it and you say, oh, I love that. So, but, all right, so before we go, of course, each of us has different things that we're doing other than the Sandersonian Institute. So, Amy, where can we find you outside of the Sandersonian Institute Cosmere Study?
I am on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter as Coincidence Cosplay or Coincidence Cosp. Too long on Twitter. And I do lots of random updates with 3D printing that I do and costumes, all sorts and shapes and random.
She's making guns right now.
I'm making guns. This is part of a gun. It's awesome. Yay.
I'm not sure if that's better or worse than running. So.
It's
All right, Jordan, where can we find you when you're not talking about?
This week I have something I'm really excited to actually to promote. Saturday I'm starting a stream of XCOM that I'm going to be doing it once a week called Saturday Morning XCOM. It'll be starting early in the morning, I believe around 8:30 Mountain Time, or was that Pacific Time? I'll double check what I wrote down. Point is, go to twitch.tv/splicestream, and if you subscribe to my channel, you can potentially become a soldier in my XCOM, Saturday Morning XCOM. We're gonna have cereal for eating, and when we go to break, we're gonna have commercials, just like good old Saturday morning cartoons, except they'll be old commercials that'll make you laugh. But we bought this crap.
I'm sorry, Jordan. I think you mispronounced cannon fodder.
No, I said soldier.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right, and
Rosie.
It's
and then
Cosmere Puppy. That's who I bend down to throw things for all the time. And off she goes.
And okay, so when I'm not here, I'm typically writing board game reviews over at www.innkeeperstable.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all of them at @innkeeperstable. Now, if you want to support the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, one of the best things that you can do is tell your friends about us, share the video, share the podcast, and especially helpful, go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. That'll help other people to find us and build our community. Live episodes of the show stream on twitch.tv/innkeeperstable every 2 weeks. That's Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. If you have questions for us, we're hopefully going to be able to start answering questions as the show continues to grow. you can email us at cosmerestudies@gmail.com. Our videos will be posted on YouTube typically within a day or two after first the actual stream.
Might get delayed slightly this time.
This week we're probably going to get delayed because my computer is having all sorts of fun issues. So hopefully once that gets fixed, we can get it up as soon as possible. We'll put the videos on YouTube. If you want to find us, you can search for Cosmere Studies. Hopefully once we get enough subscribers, we'll be able to have a custom URL for that. But right now it's a licensed plate. So
it's scary.
Times 3.
If you want to follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Cosmere Studies, we'll put up announcements there. Amy's got some great pictures coming up for the Instagram feed.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just grateful to have you here. It's been a lot of fun, guys. On behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for watching. And remember, there's always another secret.